All right, let's get into our first topic then. And should MPs back the smoking ban? Today, MPs are set to vote on the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, which the proposed law looks at a clampdown on the sale and advertising of vapes to young people, and it would also mean raising the age of buying tobacco to effectively ban younger generations from ever smoking. The Health Secretary has called it an urgent intervention and says that it will help children avoid a life imprisoned by addiction. Do you agree with that? Should MPs vote to back the smoking bill? Get your calls in for this one now. How do you feel about this bill, Matt?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh?
Ban it. And this originally was a Rishi Sunak idea, of course, and then his government ran out of time because he called that early election and Labour won with a landslide. I'm pleased that Labour are taking this forward. And yes, I understand that it will mean that there will be adults with different rights, because if you are born after a certain point, you won't be able to buy cigarettes. And if you're born before that point, you still will be. And I agree that I understand that is not ideal, because you don't really want to have a two-tier citizenry. But for me, that's the lesser of two evils, because smoking, what it does to us is an evil. You just look at cigarette packets, look at the pictures of it. And if you're starting from the point of not actually being addicted to it, why would you ever start?
Well, still 13% of us still smoke, and those pictures have been on there for quite some time. Would you take it a step further and ban vapes too? Because the vapes are slightly different, and they would it would be effectively a ban on advertising, maybe a sale of sort of the more child-friendly flavours, if that's a way that we can phrase it.
I'm obviously not a health expert, let alone a vaping expert, but my instinct tells me that vaping might turn out to be really quite dangerous. So Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, says we already know that they do harm. My only equivocation about the vaping is that we don't want to stop vaping from stopping smoking, if that makes sense.
Wilfred, you're quite shocked at
I'm quite shocked. I'm an ex-smoker, OK? Did you smoke?
Never. No, I've never had a single cigarette in my life.
OK, fine. So from someone who is an ex-smoker, I quitted smoking, not because I was frightened of the law, it was because the education that was out there to say, actually, this is really bad for your health. So over time, I was able to stop smoking. And then must be about 15 years since I smoked. The moment you ban something, that ain't going to stop people from smoking or vaping. If you start criminalising an activity, you might even make it fashionable. It is much better to pump in the information, the education about actually what it could do to your health. Because in time, people will decide whether they're going to quit or not. I'm just really, really against any form of banning, because you then start to criminalise something that I think will then lead to some other problems.
To an extent, Wilfred, you are right. We have seen the numbers of people smoking slowly dwindle over the decades, certainly a sharp fall when we had the smoking ban indoors. But we have had these really graphic images that Matt has alluded to.
When I was smoking, they used to have them there.
But people are still smoking.
Yes.
So the information is there, and on top of that, they are extraordinarily taxed. So they are so incredibly expensive. It's a wonder that anyone can actually afford the habit.
And again, as an ex-smoker, I used to see these horrible lungs and things like that. And what you do is that you cover them up. People find ways of actually not confronting the truth of it. And that's why, if they're not going to be adhering to the things we've done so far, what makes you think that actually by then actually banning it and therefore criminalising it is going to make any difference?
A couple of things. In my case, I think one of the reasons I didn't smoke as a child was because it was illegal to smoke as a child. And
you were a good kid, you were.
Well, I was impacted by the law, and I think some people, funny thing, are actually impacted by the law of the land. But the second thing is this idea that you might make it sort of trendy or cool, or that you might create a black market and criminalise it.
You will do.
Look, if this law comes through, as I suspect it will, and if in 10 years' time we end up getting criminals who, instead of peddling drugs, are peddling cigarettes, then you might turn out to be right. I just think it's very unlikely.
Well, but historically, prohibition has never worked.
It's never worked.
Prohibition will drive things underground, and the worry is if something is driven underground, that the quality diminishes, there's no standards there.
Yes.
And actually what we could get is far more dangerous cigarettes on the market.
Right.
I don't think there will be the drive for people to go through the process of breaking the law and buying cigarettes.
They do it
illegally. No, but if they don't become addicted in the first place, and that's what the government is trying to ensure doesn't happen.
But
I think
that would suggest, Matt, that we wouldn't have people taking cannabis in this country.
I think there is I'm really anti-cannabis, and I think it does really bad things to you. And by the way, the antisocial effects of it are horrific.
But
if you walk down my street, I'm just laying out my store. I think cannabis is really bad. But I think the appeal of cannabis is different from the appeal of cigarettes. Because I think the only enjoyment you get so I'm told, from cigarettes once you're addicted. Leave cannabis out for a second, because we're in dodgy territory, and I certainly don't want to encourage people to smoke cannabis, and I never have in my life. But my understanding is that it might give you, as well as being bad for you, a more pleasurable experience than smoking a cigarette. I might be wrong.
See what you're saying.
But alcohol as well. Alcohol definitely didn't work with Prohibition. Alcohol is bad for you, in my view. I drink. But it is something you can do in moderation. I mean, even if you drink in moderation, I suspect it's still bad for you. But you can't really smoke in moderation.
There's plenty of social smokers.
Not without it risking killing you.
No, I used to smoke in moderation. I used to smoke silk cut. I was probably a 3 cigarette a day sort of person.
That's still dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's the amount of cigarettes that you actually smoke which determine how dangerous it is, and then you have these very, very strong cigarettes. So the argument that actually you could do drinking in moderation or cannabis, I just don't buy that.
Okay.
Is that?
Let's go to the callers. Pamela from West Yorkshire, you're up first. What do you think about this bill? Do you think it's going to be helpful long term, or it could have unintended consequences?
I should think it would have very unintended consequences because of the feeling. It's not just the fact of smoking, my love, it's the fact of telling us how we may live our lives. We have enough taxes put down on us one way or another. Why do they want to take away a bit of smoking? Now, I am 86 in a couple of weeks. I grew up, I was born into a very heavily smoking family. All my relatives smoked, and smoked really heavily. My mum had 5 children. None of us smoke.
Okay.
My 3 uncles, I don't know how many children they had between them, lost count. There's 3 of them out of the lot who smoke. The others don't.
Pamela, I think that goes to show that there is dwindling numbers in the amount of people that smoke, and part of that's information and education on what it does. Part of that's also maybe society's changed and there's a bit more stigma around smoking than there ever was before. All of that probably for the best. But when it comes to your original point, which I think is something that people across the country are going to feel, this is just more nanny state. This is the government telling us how to live our lives and taking away our free choices. Well, Pamela, they do that very regularly. The government, that's part of the government's job, is to make laws to protect ourselves when perhaps we won't be good enough at protecting ourselves for ourselves. For example, they make you wear seatbelts when you get in a car, or they've banned heroin, or, cannabis, or the government put laws in place all the time. And maybe smoking is just one of these things that are so detrimental to our health that there has to be a law in place.
Well, I just don't tend to agree with that, because to me it's all a bit short-sighted. Let's just take one scenario of my family. They worked hard. They were miners, the men. Why should a government, I don't care whether it's Tory, regular, who the hell it is, but why should they tell my grandfather, my father, and my 3 uncles who've worked damn hard down the mine, and it is hard work. My God, they come home black. Yeah,
it's probably worse for their health as well, Pamela. So right. The interesting thing about this law is that they wouldn't be telling your father and your grandfather and your brother not to smoke. They would be allowed to smoke until the end of their life. It is the younger generation. It's my son that won't be ever allowed to smoke, and he hasn't paid any taxes yet. Pamela, but thank you very much for your call. Jennifer from Lancashire, what do you think about this bill? Do you think it's going to have unintended consequences, that long term it's just not going to work?
Hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Hi, Storm and Pamela. Do you need to mind your own business? I'm fed up with these people coming on, MPs and what have you, and all you want to do, ban this, ban that, ban the other. The other week, it was putting things in schools about being vegan. I've been smoking since I was 14, and I'll be 70 in March.
Oof, that's a
I'm
long
tackling
time.
now, but they're on every day. What about the drug addicts who are taking heroin?
Well,
It
yeah, I
really
mean,
doesn't
Jennifer, that's illegal and there's services to help with addiction and that. But just going back to the smoking, first of all, you wouldn't be involved in this, Jennifer. Actually, what this bill is saying is not telling you that you can no longer smoke. It's saying that, OK, the horse is bolted for certain generations. There are people out there that are already addicted to this substance and actually paying vast amount of taxes and probably contributing quite a lot to the government purse. So we're not going to ban them from the cigarettes that bring them pleasure. What we're going to do is we're going to stop the young people now from ever starting, forever feeling that addiction. Because the truth is, Jennifer, really, if we were being honest about it, if cigarettes just popped up tomorrow and they became a substance, they would never pass any standards or regulations. They would never be legalised.
Well, people are coming in from miles bringing Dutch cigarettes in. And that's what people will buy, buying the fake ones. But these people here, it's every time on January Vine, there's something they want banning.
I'm glad it's not my show then.
Don't do that. Pardon?
I'm glad it's not my show then. It's just in Jeremy Vine. They're always trying to ban something. I think we do try to ban things quite regularly. But Jennifer, I totally hear your point. Thank you very much for your call. So that's 2 callers that think this is very nanny state.
I would just say that if you're addicted to something, are you really free? So the people who are ringing in...
It's very philosophical for me on a Tuesday.
No, the people who are ringing in, I understand where they're coming from, but they're saying, don't interfere with our lives. Nanny state, we should be free to do what we want to ourselves. But once you're addicted to cigarettes, are you really free?
So would you ban it for those that are already addicted then? Would you just do a straight ban across the board?
I don't think you can, precisely because they're addicted.
Okay.
And so if someone is addicted to a cigarette and they've been allowed to get to the point of addiction because it's been illegal, suddenly saying we're going to take this away, even though you are addicted and feel like you're so heavily reliant on it, I think would be unfair and against natural justice.
And maybe cause bigger problems. Liz from Southampton, what do you think about this bill?
Hello, good morning, Storm. I would wholeheartedly support it. I think we have a moral right to protect future generations. I worked in general practice 25 years and I had a big role in respiratory care, and I have seen so many of my very dear patients be killed through smoking. I've also seen many patients that I thought would never quit smoking, quit with vapes, which was was fantastic. The problem with vapes are, from what I understand, they're 95% safer than cigarette smoking. But I believe that the research was done on a sort of a 3-month period. But now we've got, this massive market and people that are vaping that have never smoked. And I think that really needs to be looked at.
I think it is being looked at, but you're right. I think time has to pass, unfortunately, for us to really work out the extent of vapes and the impact of vapes. But just going back to the smoking situation, if we ban it, it's prohibition, it'll go underground. We could get dangerous cigarettes on the market. I mean, already there's a sort of black market for cigarettes, apparently, which is vast. I had no idea about. So you ban it, that just gets bigger.
But they are dangerous.
Exactly. I've seen so many people die, and it's tragic.
OK, Liz, thank you very much for your call. Very quick one from Jenny from Merseyside. What's your view on the bill?
Well, I believe if they're considering to ban smoking and vapes, they should be considering banning alcohol as well, because alcohol has been a big financial burden on health for the country. You know, there's the NHS, there's accidents, there's fighting, addiction.
Jenny, it's a really interesting point. I think a lot of people think that if they ban cigarettes in this way, it will be a slippery slope to banning alcohol as well. Would you be a fan of banning alcohol?
This is where it gets, if we're talking about, we could be having a conversation about drugs, which are already banned, and should we unban them and decriminalise them to take criminals off the street? And the argument is we're losing the war on drugs. And this is where it gets really, really difficult for me, because I think drugs should be banned. I think cigarettes should be banned for the younger generation. But I don't think alcohol should be banned. And that is a very difficult thing for me to defend philosophically.
And you can't defend it because alcohol is far more dangerous. The good news is
Can be.
No, it's dangerous because the good news is this actually alcohol consumption's on a decline. Younger people are not drinking alcohol as much as our generation, and there's some really, really good, really non-alcoholic beers and wines on the market. So that's what's really interesting, because it shows it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, I mean, what is interesting, I think, and you're kind of touching on that, is the younger generation are drinking less and smoking less.
Yeah.
So actually, we might, without even putting any of these bills in place, see that slide in the
Could
right
I just
direction.
say, I mean, it may be a cultural thing because alcohol has always been legal during my life, and because I use alcohol, if that's the right word, that's coloured my view about why I don't think it should be banned. I would just say, as I've already said, that it is bad for you, and that my wife, as you know, is almost identically pregnant to you, same sort of time. And since she became pregnant, I have, out of empathy for her, barely touched a drink, because it's a weird thing. Well, she would. She'd have that reaction. But
Absolute
because
part-timer.
it's not right that one half of a couple does and another half doesn't. All I'm going to say is I feel so much better for it. I was never a heavy drinker, but not drinking is so much better for you, in my view.
Well, we're going to talk about drinking a little bit later in the show.